So we are okay. I am going to do the recording and wait a little bit for the attendees to come in. I see Teresa, Vitaly, attendees are coming in. We are not broadcasting to Facebook yet. In the future, that's something to consider. Okay. Okay, let's start our TOM storytelling hour May. We are going to have some fun together, and our MC is Oscar. Our storytellers are Paul, Jerry, Martin, Tricia, Albert. Did I say everybody? Okay, so we are ready. Oscar, please take it away.
Okay, all right, I'm going to be introducing our first speaker. Before I do so, I want to thank everyone for joining our second ever TOM Story Hour. We did one last month in April. And anyway, I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'd like to introduce Paul Finkelstein, a full marathon runner, serial entrepreneur. He shares the story of the day he fainted while he was driving and the experience of wearing a heart monitor before the marathon. He is connecting to us from Florida, and his speech title is Overcoming Great Odds. Paul Finkelstein.
Aloha, fellow Earthlings. It's great to be here. This is an amazing opportunity for me to reach out down to Earth and share with all of my friends down there. If you are from Florida or New York or Pennsylvania or anywhere in the United States or around the world, you are going to want to sit back and hear and enjoy. I'm going to take you back just a little bit so you can see where I got my training from, my marathon interest in training and why I got passionate about that. At age 18, this normal kid named Paul Finkelstein, he loved soccer. He loved running around the soccer field. He loved tennis. Oh, by the way, all those tennis players out there, you want to pay attention to. Well, something happened to me at graduation day at the end of high school. The day after graduation, everybody went to party. The next day, I decided, well, it wasn't really my decision. My parents, myself, and my scoliosis doctor decided that a 2, 6, 15, 16-degree curve was not okay to just live out life. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to make too much eye contact. And now you're sporting my COVID-19 hairdo, as you can see. So because of that, I had to go the next day to scoliosis surgery, where they opened up my back, from the back, of course. And they took out the 2 bottom ribs. That was comforting. Well, they put me asleep, and I just had a nice nap for several long hours. After that was all done, I found out they took out my 2 bottom ribs and they put in a steel rod the size of one of those drumsticks. If anybody here plays drums, the size of your drumstick was the size of the steel rod that they put right in the middle from my neck all the way down to my waist. Now let's fast forward just a little tiny drop. Right after a 2-week stay at the hospital, I was recuperating. I had a respiratory, I think that's the right word, therapist at my home, and my parents got cable for Paul at that time. That's the first time I got cable. I mean, try dragging a child or anybody or an adult off of an iPhone, and I got tired of watching cable. I made that respiratory therapist walk with me out the door, down the driveway, down the street to the next town over. Probably was a 10, 13-mile walk. So that was probably the hint at how I got started in marathons. Let's continue on with the story. I was looking at a Facebook, not a Facebook post, before Facebook, a little social media site called ryze.com. Not a lot of traffic going on there now, but it still exists. I saw a guy on his profile around 2004. and he had this picture, a huge picture. It took up almost his whole profile of him going across the finish line. And I could see why you'd want to do that, because if you're running 26.2 miles, you're going to want to put up a huge picture on your profile too. And I said, I want to do that. Does anybody here want to do that? I mean, raise your hand, and I can't see it, but you can see it right back at yourself and go, wow. If you want to do it, then go for it. And I'll tell you exactly how you could overcome any odds, anything so great as possible that you want to overcome. I have the solutions for you. Hey, let's take a little quickie break in the middle of my speech. I've been reading this book, Think and Grow Rich. Matter of fact, I actually got multiple copies of it. Why would I buy multiple copies of this Think and Grow Rich? Because after I read it, I underline every single word while I'm reading it. And then I have a fresh book and I could read it again. And in that book, they actually tell you about this thing called definite purpose. And I just happened to be picking up this book over the last couple of weeks during our COVID-19. You need something to do for self-development so you come out stronger at the other end of this pandemic. And in this book, in chapter 2, he talks about definite purpose. He talks about desire, burning desire, so deep. And that, I think, is what I had when I had the scoliosis surgery. I zipped out, wanted to go walking and running to the next town, dragging my respiratory therapist with me. In 2005, I was driving my father-in-law to the doctor, or I was driving to his house to drive him to the doctor. And I never quite made it there. Here's my other overcoming thing, something that I overcome. In the middle of the highway, I fainted, driving 75 miles an hour, going through the toll booth, and then driving a little bit more at high speeds. Next thing I know, I'm waking up, and I look behind me in this giant lamppost, the kind that light up highways. It was a $2,000 bill on Allstate. Premium was nothing, but I mean, I'm glad that I didn't hit anybody. I'm glad that I'm okay. The airbag went off. I woke up and there was these Hispanic workers that came off their tractors and their lawn mowers, and they're all knocking on my windshield. Mister, are you okay? And that experience really freaked me out just a little bit. I'm like, what happened? I didn't have a history of this. I discovered what syncope is. My wife said, you're not training for that marathon anymore. That's coming up in 2 or 3 months. What are you going to do? Well, went to the doctor, went to the emergency room, checked everything out. And then I said, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to overcome this. The doctor gave me a Holter monitor about half the size of my phone, hooked up a wire like this, attached it to my heart like you're getting an EKG at a doctor's office. He thought I was just going to have breakfast, lunch, dinner, take a nap, do that for a week, analyze it. Nope, I'm going to get my money's worth out of this Holter monitor. I took it to the beach, took my feet off, took my socks off, my shoes, and I ran barefoot on the beach 5 miles this way and 5 miles this way. And I really got to see, if I could hear my Holter monitor, it would have been like beep, 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 beep. So I can get really my money's worth out of this. Like you want to get your money worth out of a doctor, out of any professional, a lawyer, accountant, you want your money's worth. The doctor said it's okay. You could continue training for a marathon. Thank goodness he saw it. Heart rate was good, but just what's this fainting thing? Let's control that. Got through that. But in the beginning of all this training, I want to talk more about this definite purpose, because Paul was a shy kid. Why did he take up running? I don't even know. I wanted to mention this a little bit because you mentioned in the title of my speech here, or story, that it is about marathon training, but there's so much more to it than marathon training that got me ready to running a marathon. Matter of fact, I wish somebody told me about that little known organization that's huge in 143 countries. You know what I'm talking about. It's called Toastmasters. And I wish someone told me about it back when I was in high school. I wish someone recognized it and someone gave me that key 5-minute speech with impact, a question, something to get my attention, because most speeches do have that question in the beginning. So I would have listened. But no, they probably didn't give me the impact speech. They probably didn't have the ample training. But fast forward a little bit further along Paul's journey. In college, my parents made me take a Dale Carnegie course. There were 50 adults in it from Rochester, New York at Kodak Corporation. I was completely shy, out of my element. But I won a prize. I won a pen in that class. And they said this exciting training to get someone. If you're shy and you're listening to this as part of Paul's marathon training, it's just this definite purpose, everything. I'll tie this all in somehow. They said, if you say this one exercise at the very last week of that Dale Carnegie training, they took a newspaper and put it in my hand, and they had me slapping it on top of a desktop. You know why people can't get things done? I'll tell you why people can't get things done. Because they don't have the ability to get things done or something like that. And in 50 people, I had so much emotion, so much anger, and I was wadding that newspaper on top of that desk, and it really brought out all this energy. And I suddenly realized that I was in front of 50 people. I didn't even realize it because I wasn't so much involved in the action of my speech by swatting a newspaper on the desk in front of the class. Maybe all these were part of the little nuggets along the journey of Paul and the education along the journey of Paul of how to train for a marathon so I could finish that marathon and not give up. And how not give up, I had these things that were in this book, Think and Grow Rich, on chapter 2 that talks about burning desire, talks about definite purpose. And that definite purpose was so critical in how I was able to just overcome everything, including COVID-19. We need definite purpose to accomplish any goal, period. That's how we accomplish everything, overcome everything. And I released the virtual lectern back to Oscar.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much. Funny, being a drummer myself, I could actually identify with your scoliosis surgery, the size of the drumstick. So fantastic. Now I'd like to move on to our next speaker, who is Nigeri, and I hope I pronounced that right. But she's a bread storyteller and event consultant. She's connecting to us from Kenya, Africa, and she attended our first T.O.M. storytelling hour in April and was inspired to tell her story, A Fire. So, A Fire, please welcome Nigeri.
One September afternoon, in a village in central Kenya, the afternoon sun had cast his gaze, like a strict head teacher's warning gaze, sending scorching rays onto the dry ground. The soil, baked by the heat, had crack lines, like an eggshell from which a chick is about to hatch, suffering from extreme heat and want of rain. Anyone who dared to walk barefoot, as many of us villagers tended to do, risked burning the soles of their feet on the hot soil. My mother sat at the shade of the acacia tree in the middle of the compound, her winnowing basket in hand, and we, the children, watched from the shade of the open kitchen as she bounced maize off from the end of of the basket to the other, without one single seed falling off the basket. The hot, lazy sun was suddenly interrupted by cries of distress. Woo-wee! Woo-wee! Translated to help, help. My mother quickly thrust her winnowing basket aside, rushing towards the road, fastening her clothes together and shouting back at us, "Please lock the house." And which we did, and we ran to catch up with her. At the slopey side of the farm, 3 homes away, no 2 people could agree on how the fire had started. One of them said that probably a passerby had cast a lit cigarette butt into the grass and a fire had lit and gone on, while another blamed the neighbor for trying to clear some bushes and burning them. Then the fire had got out of control and the wind blowing caused it to spread. But there was no time to argue, since the fire now threatened to burn up the village, our village. And thus the distress called for villagers to come help prevent it, at least from reaching the homesteads. Men and women holding large branches had begun beating down the fire, seeking to redirect it from the direction of the homesteads, where the cattle sheds and the houses were located. My mother and her fellow villagers realized that since they could not fight the fire, the best they could do was to keep the fire away from their homes. Though that was more than 30 years ago, I can still remember the sound of the fire burning brightly, fiercely, widely, lips flaming, leaping from one tree into another, chased by the wind, the sound of the twigs cracking in submission as the orange fire consumed them. I can still hear the sound of the tree branches hitting the ground in unison as the villagers worked to influence the course of a fire they could not control. I can still see the sweat dripping down their faces, some stained with soot, a cough here, a cough there, and smoke billowing in one direction and then another because of the wind. The fire, satisfied, eventually died down after many hours, having burned every piece of grass, every bush, every maize stalk that previously stood on the now barren ground. Previously hidden homes were now visible through the fences. Fences and bushes around them had been burnt down, and the trees had been stripped of whatever covering they previously wore. As we walked to school the next morning, in our innocence as children, we were mesmerized by a still smoldering log over there, and by the sound of the burnt grass stubs as we deliberately stamped on them, and seeing a land that is stripped of whatever it had before. The land was all black and sooty. The fire had transformed the land from brown and bushy to a naked, barren, and hopeless-looking expanse of black. The hot sun still burned. What could be worse? 3 weeks later, in mid-October, the rain started falling, showers at first and then downpours. The farmers could now begin digging holes and rows on the land as the ground had begun softening after the very dry season. I have always been fascinated by how the bright green grass springs up after a fire burns down the land, owning its place among the blackened stubs of grass, a beautiful contrast of green and black. With the rains, the land that had previously appeared hopeless and bereft of life began springing to life. Leaves began coming out of the ground. From the dead shrubs, one leaf and then another, one blade of grass after another. A refreshing poured out. The ground sprouted with new life. Wild flowers that we had not seen in years decorated the lush landscape as the months went by. And my mother discovered several acacia tree seedlings. You know, she had previously believed that acacia seeds do not germinate, but the fire had burned life out of them. Occasionally, a fire will burn through our lives, stripping us of previously held pride, property, and place, burning up our status, substance, and sometimes our sense of direction. And life begins to look like an endless expanse of black, all soot, ash, and lifelessness. It looks like the end, as it did in my mother's farm and in our village in that season. This story, the story of my village in central Kenya, and of a fire that burned when I was 10, is a story to remind us that it is not the end. Some seeds need to burn for the life inside them to come out and to be released for new growth, new ideas, fresh blessings. It is only a moment because a rebirth is coming, a chance to rebuild. 6 months after the fire in our village, in our innocence, we walked through the grass on our way to school. stopping to pick and smell the wildflowers, tying together long strands of grass in play. Although we still saw some blackened tree stumps in the midst of the bush, the rainy season had brought in a refreshing, and the fields in our farm and in the village were lush. They were green, they were hopeful, born again, a rebirth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nigeri, for your fascinating story. And I couldn't help but think of the parallels between the spreading of the fire and the spreading of the COVID-19 virus internationally, and how we all hope, I'm sure, to come out stronger with some kind of rebirth after this difficult period. Well, I'd like to now introduce our next speaker. Once again, coming to us from Florida in the United States, this is Martin Green. And he's the top of the mind guy, all about personality. It can give a very different approach to everything, and he puts his theory into action. And Martin Green's speech is, "If I only knew." If I only knew Martin Green. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. I'm so excited to be here. And if I only knew then, it's back in 1968, and we're getting ready to buy the new family car. Now, you have to understand, my dad typically would buy a new car every 3 years because he was on the road. He had a selling route. He would go to Pennsylvania, New York, and he put a lot of miles on a car. So typically after 3 years, he would pass the car down to my mom. And normally he would just show up and the car would be in the driveway and that would be the end of it. But this year was different. This year, he drove us to the dealer back about 20, 30 miles away where he used to work as a car salesman back many years ago until the car dealership burned down. That was in Highland Park, New Jersey. It was called Tenbrook Motors. Well, we showed up, and again, this is my mom and dad and my older brother, who's 4 years older. I was 15 years old at the time. My brother was 19. And we show up in the dealership, and there are two cars that immediately caught my dad's eye. The one on the right, which was a Plymouth Belvedere, and the one on the left, which was a Dodge Charger. Now, you have to understand who my parents were. And I want to just show you a family picture real quick. This is my, whoa, that's not working real well, okay? There you go. Well, my mom and dad were very conservative people, my dad particularly. And I'm going to just show you real quick who my dad was. He was this guy. My dad was kind of authoritarian. He believed in stability and structure, responsibility, and everything was rules. And everything was, if you think about a person who thinks within the box, that was my dad. And he rarely strayed from that. The only time he would show emotion and a twinkle of satisfaction was if we were talking about two things. One was cars, and the other was dancing. The only time I saw him take true delight was when he was dancing, especially with my mother. He was one of those people, if you go to a party and everybody was circling around somebody and they're watching them dance, it was usually my mom and dad. But then cars were his other passion. At one point in his life, he actually drove a race car a lap around, but then he pulled into the pit as soon as he realized he wasn't as crazy as the other people on the track. And that was Dad. He had an opportunity to be a professional dancer, but he passed up on that opportunity because he wanted to raise a family, and he knew that that was not a family thing. So he went into the business of sales, which was selling cars at the time. So that was my dad. Now my mom, on the other hand, her personality was more this woman. Very much a nurturer, all about relationships, avoided confrontation at all kinds, about ethics. She could see through somebody that was phony in a minute's notice and just turn them completely off. And that was her thing. She was a contributor to a lot of organizations because she believed in mission. She always did vote. She was always a voting person. She worked at the polls all the time, and that's who she was. And of course, nurturing was her critical thing. So now here we are at this car dealership, and we're making a decision about buying this new car. So which one's it going to be? Well, you can tell the one on the right is the family car. That's the one that you would expect people of that nature to be. A family car, safe. And that car cost about $4,000 or $5,000 at the time. I'm sure my dad got it for less because he was in the car business and he knew the people who owned the dealership. But the one on the left was the one my brother and I had our eye on for obvious reasons. It was a fast car. It had a 383 engine. It was really beautiful looking. It was sporty. And my dad had a twinkle of his eye about that car also, but he knew he'd never be able to convince my mom. Now, that car cost around $20,000, which was almost twice what my parents' house cost. So what a deal, right? Hard to make that transition. So how did my brother and I talk them into buying the car on the left? Well, it had one feature that no car had ever had before, and that was it was the very first car that had shoulder harnesses. Now, you have to understand, my parents, my mother especially, if you were sitting in the front seat of the car, what happened when you stopped short was she would go like this and stop you. That was the way she stopped you. So having a car with shoulder harnesses was really a big thing. So now it's A or B. Do we get the standard family car, or do we get this car with the safety features? Now that car could go from 0 to 60 in a couple of seconds. It was really a hot car. And guess what? We were able to convince them to buy that car because it had the shoulder harnesses. So we pull out of that car. Now, years down the road, my mom would inherit that car 3 years later, and you'd have to see her. She took me to the University of Maryland on a trip, an orientation trip, and she was going 100 miles an hour. And a cop actually stopped her, and she got a warning. But it was impossible not to drive fast in that car. So, but the point of that story is that my brother and I used something. We used their personalities, not against them, but with them. My dad really wanted that blue car, but of course his normal tendency would be to have gone to the family car, especially because it was a lot cheaper. He was very concerned about budget and all that stuff. So it was because we understood who they were that we were able to convince him that my dad, the safety was very important to him, and to my mom, it was her family. So safety, of course, was important. So we were able to get to that point. Now, what's the point of this for you and for me? Well, I wish I had known then and later on and realized what I had been able to accomplish with that, because later on, I was able to always connect with people when it came to a mission. But when it came to building an entrepreneurial career, I struggled. I hated sales because all I wanted to tell people was everything about what it was they were buying. If I was selling people this car, I would have told them everything about the 383 engine, about everything that they needed to know about the car, even if all they were interested was how fast does it go and how fast can I get there. That's all they were interested in. But that was not I didn't know that. So the limitations on me were pretty much that I only knew how to sell to people based on my personality type. And so I really struggled with it, because if a person wasn't a nurturing personality, that's who I am. Like my mom, I'm actually have my mom's personality. So I was very good at developing communities. I was very good at organizing communities. But when it came to selling a person a thing and asking for money, well, one of the very important things about people who are nurturers is that they're much more concerned about the mission and not very concerned about the money. And that really is a hardship, right? So when it comes to selling things, the ones who are best at it usually is this type, because they have the freedom and the flexibility. They want to win. So if you've ever seen a contest where it's a sales contest, this is the person who usually does best, because they want to be at the head of the pack. Well, how did I learn all this stuff? And what is this really? This is called BANK. And it's actually an acronym for Blueprint, Action, Nurturing, and Knowledge. And each personality type has their own thing. And we all have all four of those personality types, but one usually dominates the other three in most cases. Now, how does that affect you? Well, I was introduced to this really practicing in a Toastmaster speech in 2 years ago, almost to this day. We were practicing for a district conference, a different district speech, and one of my friends, Valerie Johnson, was actually doing a speech about this, and she taught me about this. And at the time, I was a John Maxwell trainer, and one of my favorite books of John Maxwell's is called Everyone Communicates, But Few Connect. Well, I understood immediately within the 5 minutes of Valerie's speech that this was the way to connect. And so I ran up to her quickly afterwards. I pretty much grabbed the cards out of her hand that she showed me, and I gave her a $20 bill and went home immediately. And I, what we call, cracked the code of my wife to find out what her personality was. And I found out something instantly, which was we are opposites. Now, you really didn't have to know that because my wife's personality is very much like my dad's, very much a blueprint. And she's very much in the box. She's worried about the budget, and thank God, because I'm not. And she pays all the bills and I don't. So it really comes in handy. A lot of people marry their opposite, and opposites attract, right? But sometimes opposites also attack. And there are times that we did, like for instance, on the golf course. A blueprint personality on the golf course is worried about the rules and making sure that if you hit the ball out of bounds, you take a penalty. And if you hit the ball in the sand trap, that you clean it out like it was yours. And that's what she would do, where I would be worried about getting her to the next hole, getting her to the green. So we would have arguments about, why are you spending so much time cleaning out that sand trap? And it was really excruciating until I learned about bank. Because once I understood that she had this personality type, I could now empathize with her. And that's really the point of all this. Because success in any organization and being a leader of organization is about having what we call emotional intelligence. It's not about what happens to you and not what people say to you. It's how do you respond to it? How do you deal with people of different personalities within an organization? And how can this help you? Well, let's say you're at the time where it's time to pick new leaders and new roles in an organization. And let's say you wanted to pick a treasurer. Well, you wouldn't want to pick an action personality as a treasurer because they just want to get stuff done. They just want to go. They don't want to be held to a schedule. But if you picked a blueprint person who was used to that kind of thing, they're worried about the process and planning, and they're going to keep that budget intact. So knowing who you're picking as your treasurer is a really good thing. On the other hand, if you're going to pick a membership person, well, you'd want to speak somebody who wants to build a community, probably. So you're going to want to speak to a nurturer person, but also somebody who takes action, because if you have a PR person who won't take action, your organization isn't going to grow. And then the other side of it is, who's going to be your director of your VP of education? Well, you might want to have a knowledge person, because a knowledge person is very much interested in self-mastery. They're certainly interested in the technology. So they're going to take charge of the pathways program, and they're going to help your people learn pathways, because that's what they do. They love intelligence. They're all about the big picture, and they're all about accuracy. So and also research and development. So they're going to follow all those things. So if you have a VP of Ed, you probably want to have somebody who is a knowledge person, at least have a high level of knowledge, and probably somebody who takes action as well, because they actually have to go in and do all the VP of education things. So you can see that knowing these codes, knowing the other person's code, can help you in all sorts of ways, including when you do your speeches, to make sure that you're communicating with every personality type as you're doing it. And so what I want to conclude with is that you have a choice, really. If you're going to help people make a decision and find out the way that you can help them best and help them grow, you need to be able to be interested in them and not interesting. The key is to be interested, not interesting, and listen to learn, and listen to absorb, and listen to them so that you know who they are and where their role is going to be in that future organization. Back to you, Oscar.
Thank you, Martin. What an insightful speech. One of the more insightful stories I've heard in a long time. And I would invite Martin and everybody else to also learn about something called DISC. That's dominant, influence, steadfast, and conscientious. It's actually a training that a lot of companies have done. And DISC also looks at the different personality types and how they work together. So made me think of that. It was fascinating, all the different value sets there. And being in sales, I can very much identify with Martin and my general way of being and the things that are necessary in order to be successful in sales. So I really enjoyed it. And before moving to our next speaker, I understand we're going to take a 3-minute break, and I'm going to let Ms. Sacco take us to our break.
Thank you, Oscar. We will have 3 minutes of recess. So stretch or deep breathe And I am going to pause the recording. And please someone remind me to restart the recording when Oscar comes. Okay, 3 minutes start now. Thank you so much, everybody. 3 minutes is going so fast. Now we are going into TOM storytelling hour session 2. Oscar, take it away.
Okay, one moment. Let me get to the right screen here.
Sure.
Okay, so our next speaker is Trisha Grow. She's coming to us from Pennsylvania, and she's an online storytelling specialist, also an award-winning storyteller. And her story shares how she was born and how she got an aha after struggling for so long. Her speech is Live Backwards. Live Backwards, Trisha Grow.
Have you ever felt stuck? Have you ever felt like you were stuck in a vicious circle, going around and around without making one forward step of progress? Have you ever felt like you were going backwards? I know I have. I think it all began with the day of my birth. Picture it. It's October 1971. My father, David, is sitting watching the baseball game. Now, something you wouldn't know about my father is that you don't mess with my dad when he's watching baseball. Just don't do it. But regardless, my mother, Patricia, rushes into the room. David, it's time. Oh, Pat, I haven't even watched the first inning. Your team might be in the first inning, but I'm in my ninth, and my water just broke. We have to go to the hospital. So my father, reluctantly, took my mother to the hospital, where many hours later, I finally decide to grace this world with my presence. But I can't come out just like any other baby. No. I was a breech baby. To be politically correct about the situation, I was rear facing forward. I was born backwards. And I continued to live my life this way for some time. We'll fast forward just a little bit to kindergarten, where I learned to share my colors and my 1, 2, 3s and ABCs. At the end of the year, my teacher pulled my parents aside. I don't feel Trisha is ready to go to first grade. She doesn't speak in class. She barely speaks at all. So they decided to hold me back. Do you understand what that means? I failed kindergarten. I failed kindergarten. Oh, and that was just my very first failure. I continued to struggle in school. I couldn't seem to make any headway. I tried, I studied, I looked at my notes and my books, and to no avail. In fact, I would hear all the time from my teachers, Trisha, you're slow. From my parents, Trisha, you're lazy. And from my classmates, Trisha, you're stupid. And in 5th grade, I was held back yet again. But this time, it was a blessing in disguise. What it was really was a helpful hand in the form of a tutor who was assigned to me once they realized that I was dyslexic. Dyslexia is a learning disability where we tend to see things somewhat differently. In my case, I saw things backwards. For instance, you might see cat as C-A-T, but I saw cat as T-A-C. And this is where all my problems stem from, because what I saw and what I heard were two completely different languages, and my mind could not make a bridge between the two of them. But once I received this helping hand in the form of a tutor who taught me how to look at things somewhat differently, I learned how to correlate the things I saw and heard and make a bridge between them. And once I was able to do that, I took off on the journey. I would literally engulf books. I would go to the library and fill my hands with as many as I could hold and take them home and read every single one. I just not get enough knowledge in me quick enough. And not only did I finish high school, but I went on to go to college. And it was all because of this helping hand. Now, you may be asking yourself, why are you sharing the story with me? Because you most likely were not a breech baby. And you most likely don't have dyslexia or any other learning disability. But I guarantee you, at some point in your life, you have or will feel stuck. You'll feel like you're trapped in that circle, going around and around without making one forward step of progress. Or even worse, feel like you're going backwards. Well, my friends, I'm here today to encourage you. If you feel that way, look for that helping hand. And if you don't see one, ask. Ask your friends. Ask your family. Ask anyone. Do you know someone that could help me reach the goal that I'm attempting to reach? And once you're no longer stuck, once you're out of that horrible circle, be the first one to offer your helping hand. And once you do that, we can all stop living our lives backwards.
Thank you, Trisha. Excellent. Very, very fascinating story. It's always great to hear how people can overcome all kinds of obstacles. I grew up with a friend who had dyslexia, and so I can only imagine. And the idea of looking for someone to help and offering help. Mentors are great. I've had several in my life, and would love to see how I can be a mentor to others. I know I've done it as a Toastmaster. But anyway, I'd like to now move on to our next speaker, who I happen to have met in person a few times through Darren LaCroix Stage Time University. And this is Mr. Albert Chang. He is coming to us all the way from Canada. And he has a podcast, The Enabling Boss. And he's the host of this podcast. And here we'll be sharing what makes your team thrive. He shares about his haircut during the lockdown order. And please welcome Albert with his speech title, It Looks So Easy. It Looks So Easy. Albert Chang.
March 16th, the day when the world seemed to change. Now, where I'm from in the Toronto area had shut down, but I still do go out time to time just to get groceries and other essential items. And the last time I was really out in public for a non-essential setting was 2 days prior to get a haircut. Now, I couldn't imagine that would be the last time I would be out there in a public setting, as life seemed to be as it always was. But as the days went by, I thought this was an opportunity to do something that I had never, ever done before, which was to grow out my hair as long as possible, because who knew how long this pandemic would last? And I was excited about what my hair would look like. I actually started to Google images of different hairstyles with all the men who have grown out their hair so long. But eventually, it became more of a hassle. I noticed when I was washing it, it was just too much of a pain. And now I understood why all my female friends say it's not easy washing hair when it's very long, even though at the time my hair was still relatively short. It was not long by any means. And so 5 weeks into the lockdown, I finally had enough. I knew then that I really, really needed to get a haircut because it was just driving me insane. Have you ever watched an instructional video and thought, huh, this looks so easy? All I did was watch a single YouTube clip and I thought, wow, it looks so easy because this gentleman who's showing how to cut your own hair was amazing. He was just cutting and buzzing so perfectly. And when I looked at the finished product, you would think that he paid hundreds of dollars going to a salon. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to get my dream hairdo after all. And that gave me the confidence that I could do this, the best hairdo without spending a single penny. And when the day came and the moment came, as I held the trimmer in my hand, standing in front of the mirror, something came over me. All of a sudden, the feeling of sureness turned into cluelessness. I thought, how could this be? It just looked so easy. And then I went on to proceed to start buzzing on my right side, and I immediately bailed out, which was a mistake. What that did was left a noticeable bald spot in a circular shape. From there, my plans went all out the window and it became a salvage operation. In the end, it didn't end up with the hair of my dreams without spending a single penny. But I took comfort in knowing that there wasn't going to be anybody on this planet who was going to see the mess that I created. I made the mistake once again, like many times in my life, of underestimating a brand new skill. I was reminded once again that you have to respect the skill for what it is. And all these YouTubers or anybody who have been cutting their hairs have been doing it for years. I was fooled into thinking that I would come out of this so soon with the best haircut ever. Research suggests it takes approximately 20 hours to master a new skill. And the haircut that I gave myself that day took less than, well, I would say 5 minutes. So if you can do the math, 5 minutes, and expand that over 20 hours, well, I don't know what that comes out to, but that is going to be many, 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 many more times spent in front of a mirror before I can actually master the skill of cutting my own hair. Now, it was hard not to get suckered into it, but make no mistake. Respect the skill for what it is. Now, yesterday was my second attempt. And as you can see, this time, no bald spot, which was progress. But I'm still far away from where I would like it to be, but that's okay. That's exactly the reason why hats exist. Springtime is a time where you see growth. Whether it's the flowers on the ground, leaves on the trees, or those baby birds blossoming. This spring, I grew too, with the beginnings of a brand new skill. and one that I will treat with the utmost respect. Back to you, Oscar.
Thank you, Albert. That was great. Great story. And I love the title, the way you wove it around. And I have to say, it's funny. I, about 2 weeks ago, bought a dry, what do you call this, electric shaver I've been planning to buy for a long time. And I made sure that I could try using one of the clips to do the same thing that Albert did, was to cut my own hair. Don't know if it worked at all, but I definitely gave it a shot. And yes, the YouTubers make everything look so easy. Well, excellent job. Now we've heard from all of our speakers, and we plan to move on to potentially a little bit of time to open up to our audience. Misako, do we have time for that?
We have one person for speak up. If you are willing and able, please use your chat, and I would type into your chat, let me or yes. I will monitor the chat.
Yeah, we have about 2 or 3 minutes, I think.
Right. No. I'm trying to protect your privacy, so I'm not reading who are in the session. So if you, okay, type in, thank you, Tricia. Okay, this first time open mic spring hasn't sprung yet. So we are going to move on to Tim to give us remark. Thank you, Tim. I'm going to spotlight you.
Thank you, Misako. Good to see everyone again. And first of all, thank you to all of our speakers for coming out and celebrating with us this month. It is great to have you. Thank you so much to all of you. Paul, starting us out with overcoming adversity, and that really almost became the theme for all of the speeches that followed through, whether we were overcoming the burning that Nigeri discussed, to Martin's speech and talking about finding how the personality types that we would have, to Trisha with the not going backwards, overcoming the going backwards in life, and of course to Albert's inspiring speech about hair cutting is absolutely wonderful. Although Albert, I have a cool Michael Douglas look going on right now. I would suggest some product and just go back like this. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. Don't question this just now. This is different, but this is doing okay. But well done on all of you to come out and share your stories with all of us here. We are so excited to continue this Treasures of Moments storytelling event. We're really encouraged by our first event last month, and we thought, let's do it again. A monthly ritual feels really good. So if you are out there and you see something that you enjoy about storytelling and that you could be on our stage, we'd love to hear from you. So after our event today, Misako is going to be sending out a survey, just getting some feedback about the experience that you were a part of. And if you are interested in speaking, or if you know a great storyteller and think this is a great format for them to come and share it, we'd love to hear from you. So please let us know what you think of our event. Please share this out with all of your friends and let us know what kind of storytelling you're interested in hearing about, because we'd love to bring those kind of storytellers to you. We look forward to seeing you again next month, and we hope you all stay safe and continue to enjoy the great stories that are being told. And with that, I'll turn it back to Misako for our wrap up.
Right on time. We are good at time management. So I am going to finish the recording, and we will be hanging around a little bit. So attendees, if you are willing to join us put me chat. Before I said bye-bye, I am going to put the link for the next month storytelling event. It's going to be on our website again and Facebook and Twitter. I will try as much as possible. But if you can schedule now, this is the link. If you know someone, our TomStorytellersLab.com. We have website now, so please hang around to our website. Thank you so much, everyone. Give yourself big, big applause one more time. Okay, officially,